Good evening and welcome to Dissertation Wisdom, Research, Notes, and Themes, Oh My, with Dr. Michelle Whitman. I want to tell you just a little bit about Dr. Whitman. She has over 3 decades of experience in education, and I know her passion for wanting to help you understand how to get through this process is just going to ooze out of this webinar. So Michelle, without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you. And first of all, welcome to all of you in attendance today. My hope is that you'll walk away from today's webinar with 2 or 3 strategies you may not have known about before that will help you find success on your doctoral journey. Second, thank you, Dr. Frederick, for the introduction and for allowing me to present today on a topic that is so close to my heart. I truly feel that this knowledge can make a positive difference whether you're working toward a dissertation or a doctoral project. I think that the information you'll gain today will be highly beneficial. We are going to begin our learning journey together today talking about the overarching question of why is this information important and how will this lead me to success on my dissertation journey? This is such an important question to think about, as the information contained in today's webinar can facilitate success no matter where you are in the process. It could be your first doctoral course, your first dissertation course, or anywhere in between. I'll be sharing with you some quotes from previous doctoral learners, how they were able to achieve success, and how their wisdom coupled with some strategies that I'll share can truly put you in the driver's seat for your dissertation journey. We will talk through 4 puzzle pieces today, and I call them puzzle pieces for a very good reason. The dissertation itself, the doctoral journey, whether it's a dissertation or a project, is like this big giant puzzle that you've just taken out of the box with jumbled pieces lying all over the table. And you might ask yourself, where do I begin? Which piece should I lay first? What does the final product look like? And how will I know if I'm doing this right? These and so many other questions might be going through your head. But when you have the edge pieces, which we'll talk about today, those foundational pieces that create the framework for the puzzle, you are in a very good place to begin. These puzzle pieces encompass the following areas. Puzzle piece 1, selection of your dissertation topic, the importance of the library, and collecting what I like to call gold. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. Puzzle piece 2 is the secrets to collecting this gold and how all of these pieces of knowledge facilitate your topic and your progression toward a successful dissertation or project. Once you have the research in front of you, puzzle piece number 3 is what do you do with it? How should I go about gathering the gold from each article that I read? And finally, puzzle piece 4 are a few success tips from recent graduates. All right, let's expand on this question. Why is this important? A question, quite frankly, that you should ask yourself with each new piece of research that you read. Why is this important to my topic? What does it add? What insights can I gain? And are there recommendations for future research that relate to my interests? These questions force you to dig deeper into the study and collect that gold that I mentioned earlier. Completing your doctoral journey and successfully defending your dissertation or your project requires finding the gold in research, compiling this in a meaningful way in relation to your problem statement, identifying the themes among the research, and drilling deeper into the nuggets of gold that you find. This page also contains a few words of wisdom from previous graduates. I asked some former students to identify areas that they felt were necessary for their own success. Dr. Pastor Mafikiri states, the first factor for my dissertation success was to select a topic pertaining to my personal interest and profession. I brainstormed ideas from my previous studies and what I do for people in my profession. Dr. Mafikiri works in the field of religion and religious studies, And through his work with young people, he landed on a topic close to his own heart and something that was causing problems within his hometown of Moshi. He learned from his own experiences what was important, not only to his profession, but to the people that he served, and he found a way to incorporate this into his dissertation work. Dr. Lorene Faust writes, ask yourself questions such as, why do I want to know this? And what am I trying to understand about this situation? Finally, know what prior research exists in your area of interest and identify if there is a gap in the research that you might have an opportunity to address. Dr. Faust's wisdom centers on asking yourself questions along the way. Understanding how the research you're reading could connect to your topic, and understanding the prior research. What does it say about the problem? Where does it lead future researchers? This and how the gap is discussed can create an illuminated pathway for your dissertation or doctoral project. Now, many of these ideas can also lead to a replication study, which, if it's allowed by your program, is something that I'll talk about a little bit later and can also be highly beneficial in this journey. If you have a topic that you are thinking about, maybe just an idea or a theme or something maybe that's going on at work, something that you're like, I might like to study this for my dissertation or my doctoral project, go ahead and put it into the chat box. And not only will it give me an opportunity to see that, but it might give others an opportunity to get an idea from something that you've shared. I know Dr. Frederick spoke at the beginning about networking, and this is a great way to possibly connect with someone else who might have a similar interest that you can talk to throughout your doctoral journey. All right, while you're placing these ideas in the chat box, I'm going to go ahead and tell you my story. My dissertation was entitled The Relationship Between Servant Leadership Characteristics on Teachers' Sense of Efficacy. Now, when I began my studies, I really didn't have any idea what I might want to research or even what that dissertation process looked like. Some of you might be in that situation now, and that's okay. That's exactly why these webinar series have been created, to help all of the learners that are here today, as well as those that will watch these videos, understand how to focus your topic and where you need to go in order to traverse this journey successfully. I teach 6th grade language arts in a public school in Nebraska, and my topic arose due to the lack of efficacy that I noticed in teachers. They seemed to feel overwhelmed, overworked, resistant to change, upset with leadership, frustrated, etc. And I began reading about this phenomenon in research articles, and books, and journals, anything I could get my hands on. I became fascinated with the topic of leadership and how this one aspect can dramatically reshape a school's culture, teacher empowerment, a teacher's self-efficacy, as well as the collective efficacy of a building. So I began to seek out articles on successful educational leadership styles and how they could impact efficacy. And this is what helped land my topic on servant leadership. So I read as much as I could to become an expert on that topic, which is what all of you will do once you've chosen your dissertation topic and you begin to read about it. You'll really start becoming the expert in that field the more you read. So as I look into the chat box, it looks like many of you have ideas: virtual monitoring to decrease falls, palliative care services in the ICU, HR toolkit for nurse managers, post-sepsis syndrome, the effect of travel nurses on patient experiences, healthcare work environments in the ICU, many more. I'm not going to read through all of them, but I would highly recommend all of you to continue to look through these as we're talking today, because it is a good way to connect with someone who might have similar interests within the field that you're currently in. All right, so let's move on to some doctoral wisdom from Dr. Christine Storms. We've talked about getting your topic, And now we're going to talk about how do you organize all of the different pieces of literature that you're going to be acquiring. Dr. Storm says keeping everything organized was definitely a must. The research, the citations, all of it needs to be meticulously kept. I started printing everything off, but that became too much, and then started using Evernote and Excel database to organize all of my research. There are several programs out there, but these definitely help keep everything together and organized. I was able to separate them by subject, content, and which chapters I had planned to refer to them in. So, organization, as you can see, is a key to success. And when I surveyed my past learners, every single one of them mentioned organization in one way or another. So now you may be asking, where do I start? What next? So let's take this one step at a time. Your first step and best resource is your organization's library. I do have a link in this slide to a webinar previously given about the library and how to conduct your search and get the best results based upon your topic. So if you weren't able to attend that, I would highly recommend going back into that to gather some new information and possibly ways that you can search your dissertation topic. And then underneath of that, I have a couple of different data management tools that you can look into. You'll notice that Dr. Storms mentioned Evernote and Excel database. Well, I've also given you RefWorks, Perla, and Mendeley. Each one of them have a link to their websites. And it all is very personal which one you decide to choose. One is not necessarily better than another. Just like anything else in life, we all have our personal organizational style, and it'll be up to you to decide which one works best for you based upon how you plan on organizing everything. But all of those resources are there for you to check out and decide. Okay, so now you have your topic, or hopefully you're thinking about your topic, and you've found various ways to search this in the library. You have a data collection manager tool chosen. So now you're ready to go. What next? Tip number 2, secrets to reading research. All right, so let's break this very important process down one step at a time. Once you find a peer-reviewed research article, there are a few shortcuts that you can use to determine if this is a good fit for your study and whether or not you want to add it to your collection of literature on the topic. Now, when I was gathering research, I had 3 piles that I would place things in. My yes pile, they definitely connect. My maybe pile, it kind of connects, but I'll have to come back to it later. And my definitive no pile. It helps you take this vast amount of research that you're collecting and very quickly sort it into these 3 piles so that you know which ones you're going to read much more carefully to gather information from. Okay. So when we think about reading the abstract, this contains a wealth of information about your study, and it's a great way to quickly ascertain if you should continue with this source. So let's say my topic of servant leadership, I've conducted a search in ProQuest, and I'm going to look at a sample research article that was found, and we're going to read the abstract. The first thing I want to call your attention to is the year of publication. The majority of research articles that you acquire for your doctoral dissertation or your project should be within the last 5 to 7 years. There are a few exceptions to this that I'll talk about with your theoretical framework, but for the most part, that's really where you want to aim the majority of your studies. So the first thing that when I see the date, I know that this is a possible maybe because it falls within that timeline. Then I go down here to the abstract. Let's read the first sentence. We analyzed how teacher perception of job demands and job resources in the school environment were related to teacher well-being, engagement, and motivation to leave the teaching profession. That sounds like a good fit with my topic because teacher well-being is a synonym for teacher efficacy, and it has some key words down here such as job demands, job resources, engagement, motivation. Based on what I'm seeing here, it looks like this is going to be placed in my yes pile. So let me go back to that 5 to 7 year time frame that I talked about. Right here, the majority of your sources, that's where we want them to fall. But there are exceptions to that. When you're looking for research on your theoretical framework, such as Vygotsky's zone of proximal development or Kurt Lewin's change theory, those can fall outside of that time frame. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through this slide. Okay, so we've looked at the abstract. We've determined here that this is a good fit for my topic. And I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint so I can show you step number 2. And it says, read the problem statement. What is the focus? What is not known? And what is the purpose of the study? Oftentimes, reading this can also help you understand the study's methodology, design, and target population, which can help you when you're designing your own study and thinking about how you'll do those types of things within your research. So let's go back and look at this article and read a little bit more closely what they're telling us. All right, so when I go down here, the problem statement and purpose of the study are in this last paragraph here. So if I read, in response to these research gaps, our paper tries to examine and empirically validate the relationship among servant leadership, there's a keyword I'm looking for, work engagement, and organizational commitment in higher education settings. The paper also proposes servant leadership as being an antecedent to job satisfaction, whereas work engagement and organizational commitment are consequences of job satisfaction. So I've learned a little bit more about what they're looking at, some of the factors in their research. This continues to be a good fit for me. So this tells me again that I want this to be in my yes pile. But so far, I've only looked at the abstract and the problem statement. It's a really quick way for you to organize, again, that vast amount of research that you're gathering. You don't have to go through and read the entire article initially. You can do some of these quick reads to figure out, again, is this going to be a yes pile, a maybe pile, or a no? And you can quickly sort some of that research so that you can go back and look more closely at some of them later. All right, before we go on to step 3, I want to talk about a hierarchy in utilizing your research and how to determine its fit with your topic and how these and other pieces of information could inform your study. First of all, we've decided on our topic and we've conducted a search in the library. From there, we found a few articles that we're going to delve deeper into to determine their fit with our proposed study. Our first step was to read the abstract, as that contains a wealth of information that can help us. We've decided if that's going to help us put it in the yes pile, the maybe pile, or the no pile. If we want additional information, we can move on to reading the problem statement or the purpose of the study that can identify the methodology, the design, the population, and this can possibly add to your own organizational attempts within your own study. For example, if I were going to conduct a quantitative study on servant leadership, these articles could help me to further refine my own study and possibly generate ideas that I could use for instrumentation and how to create a step-by-step approach to designing, for example, my data collection, or how did this author do their data analysis. You can gather a lot of really good ideas by skimming certain sections of the research that you have pulled up in front of you. These are those pieces of gold that I was talking about, those little tiny nuggets within the study that you can pull out rather quickly and do a good determination of a fit or no, this is not going to fit for the purposes that I'm looking for. Okay. Moving on to step 3. What theoretical foundation was used in this study, and could it work for my own study? If so, you could make note of this for future reference by highlighting that section or annotating on that section in order to pull those keywords out. This is a good indicator of theories that you should be looking for when building the framework for your own future study. Make note of these and then dig deeper to understand the theory in its entirety to determine if it's a good fit for your study or not. This research, which I'm going to go back to in a moment, uses servant leadership theory as the framework, basing it off of Robert Greenleaf's original work. And then they include more and more recent researchers. Let me go back and show you. When I'm looking here, this is the section entitled Servant Leadership, where they build that theoretical framework for their study. So they start with Robert Greenleaf, who is the original designer of the servant leadership theory. But not only do I have his name, but as I continue to browse through this section, I'm looking at a number of different researchers that I can go to the reference section of this study, and I can go look those up in the library. And it just gives me some additional studies to look through to determine, again, is this a yes, a maybe, or a no? In pulling together the research for your dissertation or your doctoral project, the goal is to become as well read as you can on the subject. You want to know how it's been studied, where has it been studied, what are they using as their theoretical foundation, what types of instrumentation are they using, and all of these different studies that you see listed here could give you additional information with regard to that. And it's just going to help you understand if the sources that you're pulling are relevant or not, which is going to help again in that sorting process to help you get through the many, many research articles that you're going to be reading. Let's go back and look at step 4. Step 4, I think, is one of the most insightful steps. When you go to the findings and recommendations for future research, what this can do for you is to tell you what still needs to be learned according to the leaders in the field, the people that have been conducting the research. What are they telling you as a future researcher still needs to be studied? And do their recommendations align with your thought process for your own study? If so, it can bolster your confidence. It can also help you think, wow, I'm headed in the right direction. Or if not, is there a way that I can tweak where I'm headed to kind of fit with these obvious gaps in the research, which is what you really want to do. You want to add to the body of knowledge on the topic, expand on what is currently known, and find your niche, your little place where your research is going to fit perfectly into that puzzle and help others understand that topic just a little bit better. So let's go to the studies that I've been showing you and look at their recommendations for further research. We can go down to research limitation and future studies. So it says, first, our research methods restrict the ability to build a cause and effect linkage between the examined variables. Hence, future research should consider conducting a longitudinal study. Even though that's not feasible within a dissertation or a doctoral project, it's a recommendation if you were to continue this after graduation. Second, our analysis focused on the relationship between servant leadership and employee outcomes. Therefore, future research might consider comparing different styles of leadership and their effects on employee engagement or commitment. So that could be an idea for another study. Third, our research highlighted only the role of job satisfaction as the mediating mechanism between the examined variables. Future research might consider the role of trust in the leader and the perceptions of justice and tenure. So this is an area, like I said, that just has so much information that can be beneficial for you as the researcher. It helps guide where future studies should go It tells you where the gaps are, and it helps you to find a direction for your dissertation or your doctoral project. Now, I've mentioned earlier about a replication study. If your school approves that and they allow those to be conducted, this is again another place where you could get ideas for that. If you were to take this particular study and model your study after this, but possibly look at different types of leadership. Instead of servant leadership, maybe transformational leadership or transactional leadership could be changed in order to build upon this study and continue its findings by looking at some of the areas that they stated were gaps. So that's what I mean when I say a replication study. You're taking kind of the idea that someone else has already created and studied, and you're building upon it. You're taking it further than where those authors did. Maybe you're changing the population that was studied. Maybe if it was conducted internationally, you're going to conduct that study within the United States and see if there's any differences. Those types of things are all possibilities as well that you can gather from reading through these different sections of the research articles. Let's recap what we've learned so far. Once you have your topic or your problem in mind, you begin your initial search in the library for related peer-reviewed studies. After you find those articles and they seem to match, you can put them into your piles of yes, maybe, and no. And you can then organize your yes and maybe pile using tools such as RefWorks or Perla or Mendeley or any other tool that you find that is workable for you. Now that you have all this research, you can begin reading through it a little bit more thoroughly using some quick tips and tricks, such as reading the abstract like we talked about, delving a little deeper by reading the problem statement or the purpose of the study, understanding what theoretical foundation was used by those researchers, looking at the instrumentation that they used to collect their data, and most importantly, what are the recommendations that they give for future research? All of this leads us to our next step. Organization to keep all of this straight. Now, how you read these articles and take notes and organize them is, again, a very personal style issue, but there are a few recommendations that I can give to assist with this. First of all, when taking notes, annotating articles, or highlighting the text, you want to focus on your keywords, the ones that you can use to organize your articles by creating folders that coincide with those keywords. For example, with my own topic, I might be highlighting things such as servant leadership, teacher efficacy, job satisfaction, school culture, leadership styles. Anything like that is going to help me pull those ideas really quickly from the article. And then if I have folders set up already on my desktop, for example, I can place those articles in those different folders, which is going to help me to organize all of that information when I begin writing the dissertation itself. I can go quickly to those folders. If I need something on servant leadership or job satisfaction or teacher empowerment, I can very quickly go to the way that I've organized all of that information. You could also decide to organize all of that literature using chapter headings or subheadings. When you write a dissertation, if you've looked at them, which I know probably all of you have, you know that the organizational structure is very similar across organizations. You could organize your literature based on some of those subheadings. For example, in chapter 1, it almost always begins with a background of the study, a way to present to the reader, how has this topic developed over time, and how has it gotten to its present state? So as you're reading your research, if you find articles that you know you're going to talk about in the history of the problem or the background section, you can put them into that folder. Another section that you could create might be the theoretical framework. any of your articles that relate to servant leadership, teacher efficacy, transformational leadership, leadership internationally, leadership within the United States. All of these can be placed into that folder so that when you're writing that section of chapter 2, you can pull those articles very quickly and cite your sources as you're writing your narrative. Another one is the significance of the study, which is where you discuss why this topic is important to the field. Again, as you're reading your articles and it talks about the current state of affairs and why this topic is so important to the future of this profession or this particular area that you're writing about, those research articles can go in that folder. So it's just a different way of thinking about organizing it, but they both can be highly beneficial as you're going through the writing process. And like I said, it's kind of a personal preference how you'd like to do that. A third way could be collating your articles by theme: servant leadership, research and education, servant leadership in the business sector, servant leadership internationally. Just different ways to put all of that together so you very quickly can go to them when you need to cite an article. You'll have to be the final decision maker on this, as each person, as I said, thinks very differently about how to organize that. But another really good tool, if you've ever used a mind map, that can be something that you could create where your topic goes in the middle, and then branching off of that can be your subheadings. Like for me, servant leadership, teacher efficacy, job satisfaction, whatever it is that I've decided are those big key words. And then off of those keywords, you're citing some of those other things that you're finding by reading the articles. Let me go ahead and show you really quickly an example of that. This particular mind map is about the doctoral dissertation process. And I like it because it's kind of crazy and it's everywhere and there's colors. But for me, that would be a good organizational structure. For someone else, they might make it look more linear and have everything connected perfectly in the way that they want to write. But this, again, is a personal way that you can take your topic and organize the research that you've collected and put it into the various sections and subheadings that you're finding within the literature so that you can very quickly come back to this and create chapter 2 based on this mind map. Almost a way to take all the research that you've collected and create an outline of sorts for that chapter, the ways that things connect. So let's go back to our PowerPoint and talk just a little bit more about that organizational piece. Note-taking and organization of those notes is a key predictor in how successful you're going to be in the dissertation and your doctoral project. You will become the expert on your topic, and it will be your responsibility to continue to read research on the topic, be in the know of what the leaders in the field are saying. What are they finding? What's important? How does it connect not only to what's been studied before, but how does it connect to your topic now? As you write your dissertation or your doctoral project, you're going to be talking about that continuously. How do these other studies inform my research? How do they create the foundation for what I'm doing? And how do they create that map for where I'm going with it? And you'll be discussing that in every single chapter. So that's why that reading of the literature is such a key piece of this entire process. Okay, next slide. The last puzzle piece, I've pulled together some success tips from recent graduates, and I want to read through just a few of them. Dr. Angie Holzer, who was recently published in the Aspen Journal of Scholarly Works, says, I clearly planned out each step of my process. I made a timeline, and I tried to reach all my deadlines. I initially looked at the whole picture and process, but then I broke it down into smaller pieces. This helped me by not getting overwhelmed. So when I talked today about the puzzle pieces of this process, you can think about your research as puzzle pieces as well. What do I have to do first, second, third, and really break it down into those smaller chunks so that you don't get overwhelmed and you're able to successfully get through everything. Our next piece of advice comes from Dr. Linnell Cam, who was also published in the Aspen Journal of Scholarly Works. The most important factor in my dissertation's success was the topic selection. I cannot stress enough that a sound and empirically referenced theoretical framework connecting to your dissertation topic is essential to linking your thoughts and ideas to a solid theory, and also for subsequent and further research. With this focused pairing, you'll find many keywords to locate research that validate your thoughts and opinions. It is so important to understand that at the doctorate level, your opinions and thoughts must have empirical foundation. And the last few tips. The first one from Dr. Janice Nembhard-McLean. Knowing when you're most productive is essential. Are you a morning person, or do you get going later in the day? Do you start out the week raring to go? Are you hating Monday and always dreading the week ahead? Not getting motivated until you can see the week coming to an end. Be sure to take advantage of the times you're most energetic and focused. The last thing I would suggest is just write. Even if it's not the best, get it down on paper. It is so much easier to go back and correct and add, knowing you have your base, than to try and make each sentence perfect the first time. And finally, Dr. Sherry Howell, ask questions. Rely on the expertise of others who have walked this journey before you. But also remember that your work is unique. Trust your professional judgment. And with that, I would like to thank all of you for listening, and let's open it up for questions.
We had a very lively Q&A session following this presentation, and just as a reminder, we don't record that part of the webinar so that the attendees can turn on their cameras, unmute their mics, and ask absolutely any question in a safe space. So the first question we got was, why do I need a no pile if I'm not going to use those articles? And in short, the answer was, the reason is that you won't know that you aren't going to use an article until you read it. So in other words, the reference section that appears in your final manuscript will be a portion of all the articles that you had to read as you were becoming an expert in your area. So for example, you might need to read between 200 and 500 articles in order to establish the breadth and the depth for your literature review, but it's possible that only, say, 100 or 125 are going to end up in your reference section. And so that led to the question, how many references do I need? And the answer to that question, and if you've been on many of these webinars, you know that the answer to a lot of questions about the doctoral process is that it depends. So when it comes to references, again, you need to provide evidence to the academy that you have presented both breadth and depth for your topic of study in your manuscript. Now, a general rule of thumb that you might find out there is between 80 and 100. Remember, that number will be a portion of all the articles that you read in order to come up with the ones that actually make it into your manuscript. But that number really does depend on your discipline and your topic. So really rely on your committee to guide you here. They will let you know if you're lacking in breadth or depth. The third question was related to reference tools, and there was some questions about RefWorks versus Mendeley. And again, the answer here is it depends. Truly, this process and each project and study is so unique. Now, regarding tools for organizing, there is no one tool that gets rave reviews across students. So people were encouraged to try one, and if it doesn't work, try a different one. But to start this process so that you can decide on one ASAP and start using it. This led to the question, when should I start collecting my references? And the answer was now, because there is no substitute for time when it comes to becoming an expert. So the sooner you can identify that general topic area, and I will put up a slide here linking you to that webinar if you haven't already seen that one, the better. As we were talking about reading articles and collecting references, Dr. Thrasher commented on the critical importance of taking notes on every article you read and doing so in a systematic way, which was a perfect lead-in to tell you about the webinar that will be happening in August. That's August 21st, and that will be on systematic note-taking, so you definitely don't want to miss that. If you enjoyed listening to Dr. Whitman as much as I do, she was a guest on the Happy Doc Student Podcast, episode number 73, and I encourage you to check that episode out. A promo for next month's webinar. As a doctoral student, you will be interacting with the IRB, and this is a stage in the process that often gets a bad rap. So I invite you to come and learn what an IRB is and how to sail through this part of your journey. Finally, be sure to follow us on social media so you can be made aware of more events just like this. Looking forward to seeing you next month.